Welcome to the EQ Fit podcast. Our mission is to equip people to prosper in every aspect of their life. Whether you're at home or in the workplace, we explore practical ways of improving success, satisfaction, finding balance, and building enjoyable and beneficial relationships. Thank you for joining us. I want our focus today to be on a major competency of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness. But just from a common sense perspective, how aware are you of what you're thinking, what you're feeling, the things that are impacting you every day? How aware are you of all of those things, and where are you right now in that? We have a process we use at EQ Fit that is just very simple. Assess, equip, align to succeed. So assess whatever it is we're assessing, and then from that, we understand where the strengths and gap areas are so that we can equip people and help them to prosper and to thrive. And then we align all of that around the right goals, the right objectives, and the desires and dreams that people have, whether they're small or big, whether it is leadership or individual life, it doesn't matter. As human beings, we're all built the same way. We think in a very similar fashion. We don't think the same things, but the way our brains work is very similar. So this concept of self-awareness is really the ability to understand at a deep level where we are in all of the different aspects of our life and how that impacts our decisions, our actions, and how that impacts our relationships and our interactions with other people. Because I don't know anybody today that can be successful without other people or impacting other people or working with other people. Now, there may be a few that I don't know of, but mostly being able to understand where you are in your thoughts, in your emotions, in your mindset, in your goals, in your objectives, in everything that makes you who you are is critical if you want to achieve the success and satisfaction in life that you want. So let me start, as I like to do a lot, with a story of a real turnaround situation. I was working with an emerging leader recently, and I've worked with thousands of people and hundreds of different organizations over the years. But this one sticks out because this was someone who had a real potential for high levels of success as a leader, but was so lacking in self-awareness that it was a she, just didn't really understand where she was or how her decisions and actions were being impacted by the different emotional drivers she had, by the different situations going on around her. And so we got into a coaching arrangement. We got into a coaching engagement that allowed her to start to kind of peel back the veil so that she could see into herself better and increase her self-awareness. So let me just kind of define what I mean by that. Self-awareness is understanding your own emotions, your thoughts, your perceptions, your values, your beliefs, the rules that you live by, all of those things. But it is also about how those things impact you, and it is about how you show up for other people. And I know a lot of people say, wait a minute, that isn't self-awareness, how you're showing up for other people. Are you aware of how other people are experiencing you? That is a big part of self-awareness, because if you're not aware of that, you may be continuing to do certain things that are just creating issues and problems. They're not leading people. They're not driving productivity. They're not driving performance. They're not engaging people. Everybody talks about engagement, how important engagement is in organizations, and we want high levels of engagement. That rests fully on leadership and how effective a leader is. The most effective leaders are those with higher emotional intelligence, and self-awareness is a big part of that. So back to my story about this young emerging leader and her struggle to really become more self-aware. I realized with her, it was the way she was brought up. It was her upbringing, and no fault, no judgment or blame on my part. I think her parents did a great job in raising her and all of that. But what it came down to was this essence of we don't really spend much time thinking about ourselves. We serve other people, we do for other people, we push on through challenges, we push on and take advantage of opportunities. And it was always this push, 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 but no real time for self-reflection, no real time to understand and grow self-awareness. And as I started to talk about this with her, it was funny because her initial response was, well, that's just selfish to focus on yourself. And I said, no, it's not selfish. It's introspection. It's understanding who you are, because so much of the uncertainty and the doubt in her mind was created because there was a gap in self-awareness, almost a void of self-awareness that created doubt and uncertainty that really didn't need to be there. And it engaged greater confidence in her when she was able to become more self-aware, because then she knew what her capacity was. She knew what her character was. She knew what her competencies were. She knew how to build good chemistry with people, the 4 C's of good leadership. And all of that came together as we worked together over a period of a year or so around enhancing her self-awareness. And it's so important, because if you don't know what your limits are, if you don't know what your unrealized potential is, if you don't know how you're showing up for other people, then you're really just making efforts in a hope that you're going the right direction. But knowledge is power. And the more you understand about yourself, the more you understand how you're showing up for others, the better you're going to be as a leader. So let me start to break this down and help all of us focus in on what is this self-awareness thing and why is it so important? Well, self-awareness is, as I've said, it's conscious knowledge of your own character, your feelings, your motives, your desires. It's about being in tune with who you are at your core, but it is also about how you're showing up for other people. So why is self-awareness so important? Why is it so crucial? Well, it's the foundation of everything else in emotional intelligence. And we know from research study after study, emotional intelligence is 2 to 4 times more predictive of success than IQ is. High levels of emotional intelligence correlate with high levels of performance across industries, across roles. Whether you're an executive or whether you're in sales or whether you're just a stay-at-home parent that wants to do better with leading their family, high levels of emotional intelligence are critical. The other components of emotional intelligence are much more difficult to develop if you don't develop self-awareness first. Without self-awareness, all those other components, they just can't develop very easily. It's like trying to build a house without laying a solid foundation. So Self-awareness allows us to understand our emotions, which in turn helps us to regulate them. That's another key component of emotional intelligence, which is self-regulation. How are we navigating our emotions? How are we regulating them? How are we showing up for others in a way that is productive and effective? And we all know that there are certain ways to communicate that will drive engagement, and there are other ways to communicate that will diminish trust, that will diminish effectiveness, that will diminish engagement with other people. And it doesn't matter what your leadership role is, and I believe everybody's a leader because we have to lead ourselves well first. And maybe you're struggling with leading yourself. It's difficult to lead other people well if you can't lead yourself well first. Now, understanding this, it impacts our relationships, our decision-making, our overall well-being. Self-awareness enables us to recognize our strengths, our gap areas, and it leads to personal growth and better interactions with other people. So, as we take that, what do we do with it? How do we enhance self-awareness, especially as a key component of emotional intelligence, which we know is absolutely critical if you want to be an effective leader? Well, first, we need to assess and equip. A lot of people call that mindfulness. We assess where we are. We understand that we need to take some time throughout the day to step back, understand what we're feeling, what we're thinking, be fully engaged in understanding that, which gives our brain time to decompress and assimilate what's happened so far that day. But so many people just drive, push, or it's the opposite. They just avoid and evade. And we have this phenomenon called quiet quitting, where people, they do the minimum they need to. And it has become even greater of a challenge now that we have so many remote workers and virtual workplaces. So mindfulness is important because we can be present and fully engaged with whatever we're doing in the moment, free from distraction or judgment. That's being mindful. And it's being mindful of where we are and what's going on. It is enhancing our self-awareness. How do we do that? We set aside a few minutes every day to sit quietly and focus on just something simple like breathing, or just allow our brain to rest and let your brain do what it's designed to do, which is process all that information and input. We get more information in one day than our grandparents got in an entire year. Think about that. The brain hasn't changed that much in a couple of generations. So we need our brain to have time to really process things. How does mindfulness help? It practices ways to increase our awareness of our thoughts, our feelings, and we do it during the day, maybe multiple times during the day, so that everything doesn't just build up and the stress build up, and then you get to the end of the day and you're just worn out and you don't have the energy to think about, you don't even want to think about what's happened that day at that point. Well, that's not helpful because you may miss lessons that would be important. You may miss opportunities that came up that you weren't as observant of in the moment, but by thinking about it, you might go back and circle back to those opportunities. There's a lot of ways to use a practice of mindfulness to really help you enhance your self-awareness. And it's going to be really important to do that after you have crucial conversations with people. What was I thinking? What was I feeling? How did it go? What was the result? If I could go back and change anything, what would it be? That's a really good practice to have. And as a leader, you're going to have those conversations probably on a regular basis, or at least you should be. Another way that you can enhance self-awareness is journaling. you can actually write down your thoughts and feelings to understand them more clearly. If you don't do that, you lose the opportunity to capture those learning moments when you can take that. The other thing that's important here, there's a skill set of emotional intelligence calling recognizing patterns. If you don't do that, where you sit down and write things down or put them down in a way that you can reflect on them, you're going to lose the opportunity to recognize patterns. Some of those may be very beneficial, others may not. You may want to get out of those patterns. You may want to change those patterns. But if you don't capture things in a way that allows you to go back and look at different instances over time, it's really difficult to recognize those patterns. So at the end of every day, how about writing down your experiences? I give people a tool I've created that literally, what was the situation? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What decisions did you make? What action did you take? What was the outcome of that? And then what would you have done differently? It's a very, very simple process, but it is incredibly powerful when it comes to enhancing self-awareness and really helping you become more effective at everything that you do. Because if we don't learn from what we've done in a day, if we don't become innovative around certain things by looking at the patterns and seeing things we might do better, we're just destined to do the same things over and over again. And that's not necessarily all that great. So another thing that we can do is seek feedback. Obtain insights from others about how they perceive you. That's a big part of self-awareness. We provide Leadership 360 assessments to our clients, and we use those quite often with clients. And usually we use those periodically. We do them every 6 months or every year, where people can see what their measures are from their peers, their direct reports, their supervisor, their other people in the company that are important. This kind of feedback is so important to a leader, but you can also do it anecdotally. It doesn't have to be a validated assessment like we provide. It can just be asking people for their feedback. One of the workshops that we do is helping people understand how to build a culture of constructive feedback. And I guarantee you there are a lot of organizations out there that need this, because the feedback is very reactionary. And unfortunately, a lot of times that reactionary feedback is not very positive. It's not the best. It is potentially hazardous. It is potentially toxic. It is potentially denigrating to an individual. There are ways to provide feedback, even criticism, in a way that is productive. And that's why feedback here is so important. Another way that we can enhance self-awareness is identifying emotional triggers. What are the things that trigger us? And if that's recognizing patterns, it's navigating emotions. Those are both skills of emotional intelligence. So identifying those emotional triggers is crucial to self-awareness. And how do we do that? Well, again, you could go back and use that same log or that journal that I talked about. Keep a log of situations where you experience strong emotions. What was the situation? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What was your decision? What was your action? What was the outcome? What could I do differently next time? That's a wonderful process to use. We can just focus attention on how we're physically feeling in a moment if we're triggered. Are you feeling kind of hot? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling upset to your stomach? What's going on for you in certain situations when you're triggered? Physical sensations often accompany emotional responses. So if we can link those and understand what's going on, we have a better opportunity to enhance our self-awareness and create practices that help us to better navigate those things. We can also have what I call therapeutic conversations with people, which is we can engage with a counselor or a coach like me, or a therapist or somebody to really talk about those triggers and to see what we can do about those triggers. So those are some ways to look at enhancing self-awareness. Next, I want to focus in on how does self-awareness impact decision-making and our behavior. Self-awareness, as it relates to our decision-making and our behavior, is huge. And here's why. If we don't understand how emotions either enhance our ability to access our higher thinking skills, like strategic thinking, numerical reasoning, adaptive thinking, consequential thinking, abstract thinking, there's so many different high-level thinking skills. Well, emotions will either act as accelerators or they'll act as roadblocks to those skills. If you're in a point of having some strong emotions, it's much more difficult to access those higher thinking skills. And that means our decision making and therefore our behavior that comes out of that may not be what we want it to be. We want to be more intentional more often with our decisions and with our actions. And that has to come from enhancing our self-awareness, understanding emotions, that's emotional literacy. What is the emotion? What does it mean? How does it impact me? And how does that impact other people? And also recognizing our patterns. Those are the two key skills when it comes to self-awareness. And the more that we have those skills strengthened, the more that we can more intentionally approach our higher thinking skills, our decision making, and our behavior. Why is this important? Well, we need to be aware of our biases, our emotions, and our thought patterns, which then allows us to make more rational and objective decisions. Now, when I say rational and objective decisions, that is not the absence of emotions. It is taking the emotional part of our brain and the rational part of our brain and letting them work together. If you have 3 different options and you're trying to choose the best one, how do you choose the best option? I guarantee you 9 out of 10 people will say the one I feel best about. Well, feeling is an emotion. So those things need to work together, the emotional and the rational, for us to make our very best decisions. And those other things like biases, emotions we're experiencing or triggers, and our thought patterns are critical in self-awareness to help us reach a point where we make our best decisions more often. It leads to better problem-solving skills, improved relationships, and increased personal and professional effectiveness. So how then do we apply self-awareness in decision-making? And I always like to make sure that we have very practical ways to approach things. This is an easy one. Pause before deciding or acting. There is truth, there is science behind that. If you're mad, count to 10. Because the emotions that are triggered will start to diminish in their intensity after about 6 seconds. So the whole point is give yourself a chance to be more intentional. When faced with a decision, take a moment to assess your emotional state before you respond. This prevents impulsive decisions driven by temporary emotions. That's a great way to say that. Then we want to consider the long-term effects. Think about how your decision aligns with your values and your long-term goals. A lot of times people make decisions in the heat of the moment that don't really align with their goals or their values. And that's a shame because then it diminishes those. It takes away from those. You may have to rebuild relationships or rebuild trust with people because of those kinds of situations. And then another thing you can do with self-awareness in decision making is reflect on past decisions. Analyze previous decisions to understand what influenced them and their outcomes. And look at the good decisions you made in the past and look at the patterns and the way you made those decisions and start to clone those and duplicate those so you can make more intentional, better decisions going forward. This helps to identify patterns, and it also helps to identify areas for improvement. Now, let's take self-awareness and look at it as self-reflection and self-reflection in regards to leadership. The definition of self-reflection and self-awareness here is the habit of deliberately paying attention to your own thoughts, your emotions, your decisions, and your behaviors. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not being selfish. It is being smart with your emotions. That's what emotional intelligence is. Being smarter with emotions. Being smarter with them, but being smarter because of them. How is that important in leadership? Leaders with high self-awareness are better equipped to handle challenges, to inspire other people, and to create a positive work environment. They're attuned to their team's needs. They can adjust their leadership style accordingly. So how can we, as leaders, practice self-reflection? Well, number one, just take time to do self-reflection, just regular reflection time. And that means practicing scheduling time for self-reflection and your leadership experiences. If we don't capture some of that, it's lost. And we are destined to make the same mistakes, go down the same pathways. Maybe some of those are good, some of those pathways, but maybe some of them aren't so good. We can also know that if we can do that more often, self-reflection and our leadership experiences, we can enhance our continuous learning and we can adapt and improve our leadership effectiveness. And we can do leadership journaling. Same kind of journaling process, right? Where we capture that information and then reflect on it so we can develop better ways and more intentional ways to get the outcomes that we want. This is great for identifying strengths and for identifying areas you want to grow in. And then mentoring and coaching is one that I highly recommend. Work with a mentor or a coach to gain insights into your leadership style. This is probably the very core of the work that I do and we do here at EQ Fit, is helping leaders understand where they are right now, what their style is right now, and then creating a pathway for where they want to go and who they want to become, and bringing their very best leader out of them. And that takes time and it takes work, but the benefits of that are immense. If you can find a good coach, a good mentor, they will provide guidance and new perspectives that will enhance your leadership skills. And that's what this is all about, is enhancing leadership skills. Whether you're a leader of a team or not, you may just be leading yourself, you may be leading yourself and your family. Everybody needs good leadership skills. Okay, so today we've explored how self-awareness isn't just a personal asset, but it's a professional imperative. It's something we need to do. By understanding and improving our self-awareness, we can lay the groundwork for developing emotional intelligence, for making better decisions, and basically becoming more effective leaders. And I think we all want that. Maybe you're not a leader today of a group of people, but you may very well be in the future. That means you're an emerging leader, and this is for you as well. Remember that self-awareness is a journey. It's not a destination. It is continuous improvement. It's learning as we go. It's capturing that learning. It's working through that learning. It's figuring out how we can do things better. If you don't like the way something turned out, change it. There's nothing wrong with that. Be innovative. Be thoughtful. Be proactive in what you're doing. It requires ongoing practice and commitment. These skills of emotional intelligence, and really they're leadership skills, they're perishable skills. If you don't practice them, they will diminish. So it's just like going to the gym and working out. We need to continually be working out with these and practicing these to enhance these skills. Just choose some of the practices we've discussed today and incorporate those into your daily routine and see how that enhances your self-awareness. I guarantee you it will make a difference, but you have to be diligent in your effort. I can't do the work for you, and as a coach, that's what I say to the people that I coach. I can guide you, I can give you the tools, I can give you the understanding, I can help you figure out where you need to go and what you need to do, but you're the one that has to do the work. Over time, you'll notice a very significant impact, both in your personal and professional life. And for those who try to think, we're just going to separate personal and professional, leave your stuff at home, don't bring it to work, that's not realistic. We are human beings, and our personal life affects our professional life, and our professional life impacts our personal life. That's just the way it is. And the key here is set good boundaries to find good balance. That's what we want to ensure that we do. Let me leave you with this. You choose the emotional environment you live in. You choose the rules that you live by. You choose whether you're going to shape your future or whether you're going to let other people shape your future for you. Self-awareness is the key that unlocks the door to shaping your own future and shaping it in a way that helps you achieve the goals and the dreams that you want to achieve. It's worth the effort. I highly recommend you dive into this, give it a try, see what you can do with enhancing your self-awareness, and see how that impacts your leadership, because these are life skills. As you grow them, they will serve you for the rest of your life, and they will serve you well. Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you have any questions about this week's episode, or maybe a suggestion for future episodes you'd like us to explore, please contact us through our website at eqfit.org. For more information and inspiration, connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube at EQFit.